Good evening. I am Clara Nightwell. Tonight, I am here with Rowan Hartsteele.
Good evening, Clara. Tired?
Some thinkers try to define reality. Others try to define persuasion. Tonight, we turn to a dialogue where speech itself is placed on trial. We are speaking about Plato and the problem of rhetoric.
A confrontation between philosophy and persuasive power in democratic Athens.
Is rhetoric a path to truth or a technique for influence?
That question leads us into the dialogue known as Gorgias.
Then, let us begin with the world that made persuasive speech a political force.
To understand Plato's critique of rhetoric, we must begin with democratic Athens in the late 5th century, before the Common Era. Political decisions were made in public assemblies, courts and councils where persuasive speech determined outcomes. In this environment, rhetoric was not decorative. It was a practical tool of power.
So speaking well meant governing well.
Not necessarily. Speaking well meant persuading effectively. Whether persuasion aligned with truth was a separate question. Professional teachers known as sophists traveled from city to city, offering instruction in argumentation, debate, and civic performance. They promised success in public life through mastery of language.
So rhetoric became a form of education.
Yes, but Plato suspected that this education emphasized victory over understanding. In the dialogue, Gorgias, he stages a confrontation between Socrates and celebrated rhetoricians who claim to possess a powerful civic art. The central issue becomes whether rhetoric is a genuine craft grounded in knowledge, or merely a technique that produces belief without understanding.
So the argument is not about style, but about legitimacy.
Exactly. Plato questions whether persuasive speech deserves authority in shaping collective decisions. For him, the health of the city depended not on eloquence, but on disciplined reasoning. In the Gorgias, Socrates begins by asking a simple question. What exactly is rhetoric? Gorgias answers that rhetoric is the art of persuasion, especially in courts and assemblies. It allows the speaker to convince large groups about matters of justice and injustice.
So it is a powerful civic tool.
Powerful, yes. But Socrates immediately asks whether persuasion requires knowledge of what is true. If a rhetorician can persuade without understanding the subject, then rhetoric produces belief, not knowledge. This distinction is central. For Plato, belief can shift with circumstance. Knowledge must be stable.
So persuasion might succeed even when it misleads.
Exactly. Socrates pushes Gorgias to admit that rhetoric does not require the speaker to possess genuine understanding of justice. It only requires the ability to create conviction in an audience. From there, Plato introduces a sharper claim. Rhetoric resembles a form of flattery rather than a disciplined craft. He compares it to cooking in relation to medicine. Cooking pleases the palate. Medicine seeks health.
So rhetoric pleases the audience.
Yes. It aims at immediate satisfaction, not long-term truth. For Plato, a genuine craft requires knowledge of its subject and accountability to objective standards. Rhetoric, as practiced in democratic Athens, seemed to lack that foundation.
So the concern is structural, not personal.
Exactly. Plato is not attacking eloquence itself. He's questioning whether persuasion without knowledge should guide public decisions. As the dialogue progresses, the discussion moves from definition to consequence. If rhetoric produces persuasion without knowledge, then it grants power to those who may not understand what they claim to defend. This raises a deeper question. Is it better to appear powerful or to be just?
So the argument shifts toward ethics.
Yes. Socrates argues that committing injustice harms the soul more deeply than suffering it. Rhetoric, if detached from knowledge, can enable injustice by allowing individuals to manipulate public judgment. In this way, persuasive speech becomes a mechanism of domination rather than a search for truth.
So success in debate does not equal moral authority.
Exactly. Plato distinguishes between power that persuades and power that understands. The figure of Callicles in the dialogue defends the view that strength and dominance define justice. For Callicles, rhetoric is a natural extension of ambition. It allows the strong to secure advantage.
A realistic position.
Perhaps realistic, but Plato treats it as dangerous. Without restraint, ambition destabilizes the city. Socrates counters that a disordered soul cannot produce just governance. True authority, in Plato's view, must be rooted in self-discipline and knowledge of the good.
The rhetoric without philosophy becomes unstable power.
Yes. And for Plato, instability in speech leads to instability in politics. At this stage, the dialogue moves beyond technique and enters the structure of civic life. If rhetoric shapes public decisions, then the character of those who wield it becomes decisive. Plato suggests that cities decline when persuasive ability is valued above disciplined understanding.
So, the problem is institutional.
Yes. Democratic assemblies reward immediate approval. They do not automatically reward long-term judgment. Rhetoric thrives in environments where appearance can substitute for examination. For Plato, this dynamic had already revealed itself in the trial of Socrates. Public persuasion, detached from philosophical discipline, had led to the condemnation of a man devoted to inquiry.
So rhetoric becomes a political risk.
Exactly. It can elevate those skilled in influence while marginalizing those committed to examination. This does not mean Plato rejects speech itself. Rather, he insists that speech must be accountable to knowledge. The structural turning point of the dialogue is the realization that political order depends on intellectual order. Without disciplined formation of character and mind, persuasive systems amplify instability rather than resolve it.
So reform would require education before influence.
Yes, and that conviction will later inform Plato's broader political philosophy. In the final movement of the dialogue, Plato shifts from analysis to consequence. If rhetoric without knowledge governs public life, then the city becomes guided by appetite rather than judgment. Socrates argues that a life devoted to domination and applause produces internal disorder, even if it appears successful. For Plato, the condition of the soul and the condition of the city mirror one another. When desire governs reason, both the individual and the political order become unstable.
So rhetoric feeds desire.
It can, especially when it seeks applause rather than correction. Socrates contrasts two models of speech, one that flatters and one that disciplines. Flattery tells audiences what they wish to hear. Discipline confronts them with what is necessary for improvement. In this framework, rhetoric without philosophy resembles a form of civic indulgence. It satisfies immediate expectations, but weakens long-term structure. Plato pushes further. He suggests that it is better to suffer injustice than to commit it, because injustice damages the moral order of the agent. This claim reframes political ambition. Success measured only by influence becomes suspect.
So victory in public speech is not the highest good.
Exactly. The highest good for Plato is alignment between knowledge, character, and action. The dialogue closes with a myth of judgment after death, where souls are evaluated not by reputation, but by their true condition. This narrative device reinforces Plato's central argument. External success does not guarantee internal order. By ending with judgment rather than applause, Plato shifts the measure of power from persuasion to accountability. The collapse he warns against is not immediate political failure, but gradual erosion of standards. A city guided by persuasive force alone becomes reactive, fragmented, and vulnerable to stronger rhetoric.
So rhetoric without restraint destabilizes from within.
Yes. And Plato's answer is not silence, but disciplined speech shaped by philosophical inquiry. In the end, Plato does not call for the elimination of rhetoric, but for its transformation. Speech, he suggests, must be guided by knowledge of justice rather than by the pursuit of influence. The tension between persuasion and truth becomes one of the defining problems of political life.
So the dialogue does not reject public speech.
No, it rejects speech that seeks dominance without responsibility. Plato proposes that genuine rhetoric would require knowledge of the good and a commitment to improving the soul of the listener. Such speech would resemble philosophy more than performance. In this way, the Gorgias anticipates later arguments in the Republic about the need for disciplined education before authority. The instability of Athens becomes, for Plato, evidence that persuasive systems require intellectual foundations.
So the solution lies in formation, not in suppression.
Exactly. Education shapes character. Character shapes speech. Speech shapes political order. The resolution of the dialogue is therefore not institutional reform alone, but a redefinition of what authority should mean. Authority grounded in knowledge may be slower, less dramatic, and less popular, but it is structurally more stable. Plato leaves us not with a rhetorical technique, but with a demand that persuasion answer to truth rather than replace it. The arguments developed in the Gorgias did not remain confined to a single dialogue. They established a long intellectual suspicion toward persuasive power, detached from knowledge. Aristotle, Plato's student, responded directly to this concern in his own work on rhetoric. Rather than rejecting rhetoric, Aristotle attempted to systematize it as a disciplined art, grounded in logic and ethical character. In this way, Aristotle can be seen as both inheriting and moderating Plato's critique.
So the debate continued within the academy itself.
Yes. The tension between persuasion and truth became a permanent feature of philosophical reflection. In Roman political culture, rhetorical education became central to elite formation. Yet the Platonic concern about moral grounding persisted. Cicero, for example, attempted to combine eloquence with philosophical training, echoing Plato's demand for character behind speech. In late antiquity, Neoplatonic thinkers interpreted Plato's warnings as part of a broader metaphysical hierarchy, where truth descends gradually into opinion. Christian theologians absorbed Platonic suspicion of rhetoric while simultaneously relying on persuasive preaching. This paradox shaped centuries of reflection on the ethics of speech. During the Renaissance, renewed attention to classical texts revived debates about whether rhetoric refines civic life or manipulates it. Early modern political theory inherited Plato's structural concern, especially in discussions about demagoguery and mass persuasion.
So the problem did not disappear with ancient democracy.
No, it intensified as political systems expanded and audiences grew larger. In modern societies shaped by media and rapid communication, Plato's central question remains visible. Does persuasive success indicate truth, or merely effectiveness? The structure of contemporary public discourse, often driven by visibility and immediacy, mirrors the assembly culture Plato observed. His warning was not against speech itself, but against speech severed from disciplined inquiry. Educational institutions across centuries have echoed his belief that character formation must precede authority. Political theory, media ethics, and civic education continue to revisit the relationship between persuasion and responsibility.
So, the aftermath is not historical, but ongoing.
Exactly. Plato transformed a local Athenian tension into a permanent philosophical problem. His legacy lies not in silencing rhetoric, but in insisting that persuasive power answer to standards beyond popularity. The dialogue remains relevant because it frames a structural question that no political system fully resolves.
Before we close tonight, let us take a brief pause and welcome Margaret. Margaret, for those who want to understand Plato's critique of rhetoric, where would you invite them to continue?
Thank you, Clara. In this case, the most direct path is dialogue, often less cited than the Republic. I would suggest beginning with Gorgias by Plato.
So this is where rhetoric is examined directly.
Yes. The dialogue stages a confrontation between philosophy and persuasive speech, asking whether rhetoric seeks truth or merely influence.
So it clarifies the tension between knowledge and power.
Exactly. It reveals why Plato distrusted public persuasion when detached from disciplined inquiry.
That feels essential for understanding his politics.
Some arguments only make sense once you see how deeply they are tied to the crisis of public speech.
Thank you, Margaret. That is a thoughtful place to pause tonight.
Thank you, Clara. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for staying with us tonight. And thank you, Rowan, for guiding us through a dialogue that still shapes how we think about speech and power.
Thank you, Clara. Some arguments endure because they define the structure of the problem itself.
If this conversation stayed with you, you are welcome to like, comment, and subscribe. You will find other episodes here where history, ideas, and power are approached slowly. Until next time, stay with us.